So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've got about 24 clips on a bunch of topics for which would be an interesting show tonight, I think. This is my weekly broadcast of the best clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the corporate media here in the United States, along with my political comment, along with some political comedy and my commentary between the clips. And as always, I'll be using clips from the Sunday morning news shows on the regular Big Five outlets here in the United States of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News. And I'll also use some quasi-news clips from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. And first, from Real Time with Bill Maher, I want to start with a follow-up to a clip of Glenn Greenwald I showed last week, where I couldn't remember the name of Glenn Greenwald's new journalistic venture. It's the Intercept.org, and Glenn Greenwald's partner in the new venture, Jeremy Scahill, was on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher on Friday, and he was explaining why this new journalistic website is necessary. In the clip I will show you right here.
Met him? You are on, I mean, your thing, Intercept, that's your new venture, right? Yes. I mean, like, in the days of yore, you would maybe like work for the New York Times. Would you work for the New York Times if they offered you a job? Maybe they have.
Well, I mean, part of it is that, you know, the New York Times slogan is all the news that's fit to print. And yet what we've seen repeatedly is the New York Times making deals with the White House under both Bush and Obama to not publish certain information that actually is in the public interest to know. When part of this NSA story started breaking, a great reporter, Jim Risen at the New York Times, had the goods on big parts of it. And the editor of the New York Times colluded with the White House to prevent that story from coming out. And only when Risen was going to publish a book did the New York Times agree to print it. So our idea with The Intercept is to try to streamline the process where journalists are running the operation and we're trying to make decisions on what should be published based on what's in the public interest and not who our friends are in Washington.
Ooh, that's kind of an indictment of the corporate media and the way it covers things like NSA spying. And Jeremy Scahill also talked about an NSA spying story that he and Glenn Greenwald broke on their new website this week about the United States ordering drone strikes based on just metadata patterns. And this is kind of an extended clip, but I think it's important to see the whole clip. Hopefully it won't get me knocked off the air for copyright infringement or whatever, because I am going to comment on it after I show you the clip with fair use commentary. So I want to show Jeremy Scahill talk about the story he broke about drone strikes based on metadata patterns, which he used to refute Bill Maher's attempt to defend President Obama's drone program, beginning with a quote from Barack Obama, I think from last May, over in this clip.
But here's his statement back in May. He said, when a U.S. citizen goes abroad to wage war against America and is actively plotting to kill U.S. citizens, and when neither the United States nor our partners are in a position to capture him before he carries out a plot, his citizenship should no more serve as a shield than a sniper shooting down an innocent crowd should be protected from a SWAT team.
Right. There are two issues here. One is that we have statements from the White House that sound reasonable like that, and then the other is the way that the system actually works. And you know, a story that we did recently revealed that we in fact are not precisely targeting individuals that we have information about who are engaged in acts of terrorism. Instead, we're using metadata that the National Security Agency provides to the CIA and the military that's based on the activity of SIM cards and handsets. If you're texting this person, if the phone ends up in this mosque and then goes to this restaurant, we don't necessarily need to know your identity. We've learned enough about you from your metadata usage that we determine you need to die. So we have this sort of pre-crime era that we're in, where instead of having a trial, or any kind of a prosecution, we have the NSA providing metadata to the secret kill list program. Then we, instead of a judge making a ruling, we have Terror Tuesday meetings in the White House where Obama and his advisors decide who should live or die on any given day. And instead of a sentence, we have drone strikes that are killing people based on the presumption, because of their metadata, that they're up to no good.
But what he's saying now is that there actually is a process, because Congress doesn't make laws anymore. He sort of set out a new guideline and a new policy. Only the Defense Department can sign off on it now, not the CIA. Also, only if capture is not feasible will we basically rain fire down upon you if you have, shall we say, broken bad.
Right. I mean, so on the one hand, every nation state has a right to defend itself. But President Obama himself said that the standard has to be that these individuals pose an imminent threat. I would be very, very surprised if the majority of the cases of drone strikes, if we actually saw the evidence that many of those individuals were involved in imminent strikes. If we want to have a policy where we engage in pre-crime as an act of preemptive war, then the country should debate that. I'm not saying that President Obama is wrong in asserting this. He's done it through executive privilege, the way that Bush and Cheney set policy. What I'm saying is Congress is totally asleep at the wheel. There is no public debate on this, so Obama can be the drone president and say, hey, look, I'm not risking American lives. But at the end of the day, when we kill innocent people, it's going to blow back against us.
And I think that's a really important point that Jeremy Scahill is making there. And I think he really schooled Bill Maher on the difference between President Obama's rhetoric and his actual program. Though right after the clip I showed there, Bill Maher still tried to argue in favor of drone strikes. And I think it shows the limits to Bill Maher's libertarianism, which I'll get to more near the end of the show using clips from an interview of Bill Maher on Friday with CNN's Jake Tapper, not on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, but on CNN's The Lead with Jake Tapper show. But first I want to show you quite a few clips from the Sunday morning shows this morning on the topic of climate change, which is nice to see getting covered for a change. And I'm going to begin with this great debate on NBC's Meet the Press between Bill Nye, the science guy, who's very popular on YouTube these days after his debate with Ken Ham. And this morning on NBC's Meet the Press, he was debating Republican Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn. And I think I've shown clips of her on my LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup shows in the past. I think I even compared her to Sarah Palin and especially to former Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. Since Michelle Bachmann's out of Congress, Marsha Blackburn may be sort of moving into that spot because she's kind of a Tea Party right-winger. And she's also, I think, the only woman in the Republican leadership in the House right now. But anyway, you can see her beginning her debate with Bill Nye, the science guy, on climate change, trying to play down Bill Nye's credentials, starting with this clip.
I think that what it brings to mind is how we utilize the information that we have. And we all know, and I think that Bill would probably agree with this, neither he nor I are a climate scientist. He is an engineer and actor. I am a member of Congress. And what we have to do is look at the information that we get from climate scientists. As you said, there is not agreement around the fact of exactly what is causing this. Even the president's own Science and Technology Office head, Mr. Holdren, says no one single weather event is due specifically to climate change. So it drives the policy to look at cost-benefit analysis, what we do about it, and the impact that U.S. policy would have in a global environment.
Well, and so there you can see Republican Marsha Blackburn trying to put a nice face on climate change denial. And of course, Bill Nye doesn't let her get away with that sort of sleight of hand on the facts, as I'll discuss a little more after I show you the next clip, which is basically the follow-up from Bill Nye to that clip here.
Well, I gotta say, once again, what people are doing is introducing the idea that scientific uncertainty, in this case about cold weather events in what we call back east, is the same as uncertainty about the whole idea of climate change. And this is unscientific, it's not logical, it is a way, apparently, that the fossil fuel industry has dealt with our politics. And this is not good. Everybody, you don't need a PhD in climate science to understand what's going on. That we have overwhelming evidence that climate is changing, that you cannot tie any one event to that is not the same as doubt about the whole thing.
So yeah, of course, that's a great refutation to Marsha Blackburn's attempt to say that just because we don't know that any particular storm is tied to climate change, that doesn't mean that the increase in violence of storms and all sorts of stuff. And I'm going to show you this great look at the weather pattern in the United States in a little bit. But first I want to show Marsha Blackburn then tries actually to talk about some facts. You know, she's on the House, what is it, Energy and Commerce Committee that sort of oversees a lot of so she's one of the high-up Republicans on energy policy. And so she seems to have some facts at her fingertips, but she kind of misuses them. And, well, before I show Bill Nye explaining how she misuses them, I'll show her trying to use facts in her next clip in the debate here.
Term gain.
Well, I think that what you have to do is look at what that warming is. And when you look at the fact that we have gone from 320 parts per million, 0.032 to 0.040, 400 parts per million, what you do is realize it's very slight. Now, there is not consensus, and you can look at the latest IPCC report and look at Dr. Lindzen from MIT, his rejection of that, or Judith Curry, who recently from Georgia Tech. There is not consensus there.
So that is kind of a bogus collection of facts from Marsha Blackburn there, which, of course, Bill Nye points out, especially the whole thing about the parts per million. That was like the worst argument of all, and Bill Nye totally destroys that argument in the final clip I'm going to show from their debate. Oh, and by the way, if you want to see the entire debate, I put a link down in the video description, as I do to the source of all the clips that I can find available online. You can find the entire debate on NBC or on the Meet the Press website. But anyway, here is Bill Nye refuting pretty much everything Marsha Blackburn just said there in the last clip I'm going to show from their debate here.
Well, once again, the Congresswoman is trying to introduce doubt. And doubt in the whole idea of climate change. So what I would encourage everybody to do is back up and let's agree on the facts. Would you say that the Antarctic has less ice than it used to? When you asserted, Congresswoman, that a change from 320 to 400 parts per million is insignificant, my goodness, that's 30%. I mean, that's an enormous change. And it's changing the world, and that's just over the last few decades. You go back to 1750 with the invention of the steam engine. I mean, everybody's been over this a lot, but it's gone from 250 to 400. There is no debate in the scientific community, and I can encourage the Congresswoman to really look at the facts. You are our leader. We need you to change things, not deny what's happening.
Yeah, so yeah, I thought Bill Nye, the science guy, was definitely the winner of that debate, even more strongly than he won his debate with Ken Ham, because I don't think that, well, I talked about that on my LiberalViewer Wednesday, first Wednesday broadcast from the first Wednesday of February, so if you want to see my opinion of the Bill Nye, Ken Ham debate, you can go and watch that video. But I actually want to move on to some other clips besides the debate between Bill Nye and Marsha Blackburn. I was actually surprised to see that climate change was covered on several different news shows. It's not a topic I see get covered a lot, and it's a really important one. I think it's because of some of the strange weather patterns, and especially all the storms on the East Coast. And we've had a big drought here where I am in California, and I like this graphic and a quick report here. From ABC reporter Ginger Lee in sort of the intro part on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and she showed how like the drought in California is related to all the winter storms on the East Coast in this clip.
This weather can be related to a single pattern locked in place. All winter, the pattern has been stuck. Every time we go into the weather center here, we see the same thing. The jet stream cutting the nation in half. On the east, the coldest air in decades allowed to come as far south as the deep south, the Gulf really. And then the jet stream just right in the right place that moisture rides along it, meaning snowstorm after snowstorm from the Great Lakes through the Northeast. But that's also creating an extreme in the west. That big ridge over here gives record drought and heat. California last year, the driest year on record.
So yeah, I really like that graphic representation of the split in the United States, where we have drought on, this extreme drought on the one hand, and then the extreme cold and snowstorms on the other. And it's all part of climate change. That's why they don't really call it global warming anymore. That was kind of a misnomer, though I'll show you a couple of Fox News clips on the whole climate change versus global warming, where Fox News, it was like awful coverage, as I'll get to in a minute. But first I want to show some more good coverage from ABC. This is they actually had on a climate scientist. Her name was Dr. Heidi Cullen, who kind of followed up on that graphic I showed, and I want to show her explanation of some good facts, kind of like what you got from Bill Nye and that you won't be seeing on Fox News. And anyway, here's Dr. Heidi Cullen in this clip.
Yeah, well, Ginger did a great job setting it up. The cold that we're seeing here is very much connected to this broader pattern. And really, when you put it into context, climate change, burning fossil fuels means that we're going to see more of these very expensive extreme weather events. Specifically, the kinds of extremes we can expect are more heat waves, droughts, floods. We're already seeing those. This winter certainly doesn't disprove global warming. And I think it's one of these things where every time we have a really cold winter, we begin to ask ourselves all over again, so is global warming real or not? A cold winter doesn't mean global warming is gone. And really, when you look at the big picture, we've actually globally been incredibly warm. January is probably going to come in as one of the top 3 warmest Januaries on record. And, the 10 warmest years have all happened since 1998.
But your big point is that
now, remember what Dr. Cullen there said about the warmest Januaries and the warmest years on record all being very recent, because that's going to totally debunk something you hear total non-scientists say on Fox News in just a minute. But before I get to that, I want to show a little more of ABC and then a couple clips from Face the Nation. But first, one of the guests they had on This Week with George Stephanopoulos was the governor of North Carolina, which is in the South in the United States, most of you probably know, and has gotten some of these heavy storms, which is unusual for states in the South. And George Stephanopoulos asked Governor McCrory of North Carolina, found an old quote of his where he said that climate change was in God's hands, and asked him after he has experienced all these extreme storms if he still felt that way. And I want to show you that clip here.
that argument in the past, you've said that you believe that this whole issue of climate change is in God's hands.
Well, I believe there is climate change. I'm not sure you can call it climate warming anymore, especially here in the Carolinas. I think the big debate is how much of it is man-made and how much it will just naturally happen as Earth evolves. And the question then is, what do we do about it and how much it will cost the consumer? I concentrate on cleaning the environment. I think that's where our argument should be, cleaning our air, cleaning our water, and cleaning the ground. And we're at a brownfields area, which right now in Charlotte, where we cleaned up the ground right here and cleaned up old brownfields, and now we have great new development. But the whole issue of cleaning the environment, I think, is the issue we ought to talk about more than getting to a debate from the left and the right about climate change or global warming. It's all about cleaning our environment and have a good quality of life for not only now, but for...
Oh, I think I cut off the very end of that clip there, but I actually thought that Governor McCrory did a good job of giving what the Republican talking point should be on climate change or global warming or whatever you want to call it, that whether it's true or not, the changes that we would make to combat it are actually good things to do for our environment anyway, and so we should do them wherever you stand on the climate change versus climate denier debate. And why that's a good Republican talking point is because there's this huge segment of the Republican Party that doesn't believe in climate change. So if you're a Republican politician, you have to be able to talk to those people while at the same time talk to the people who've actually looked at the evidence and know what's actually happening, kind of like what Dr. Heidi Cullen was talking about there. And I think maybe that Governor McCrory of North Carolina is a little worried about making sure he sounds reasonable after that quote that George Stephanopoulos found, about him saying that climate change was in God's hands, because I guess it wasn't that hard to find, because you can see him answering the same question from Bob Schieffer over on CBS's Face the Nation, where he also appeared. And I'll show you... you can compare and contrast his answers to the same question after you watch this clip here.
Governor, a couple of years ago, you made a remark that caught a lot of people's attention. You said that global warming is in God's hands. After going through this thing, you still feel that way? And is there something we ought to be doing about it in the meantime?
I think someone took chopped off the total sentence there, but I will say this, that, you know, I feel there's always been climate change. The debate is really how much of it is man-made and how much will it cost to have any impact on climate change. My main argument is let's clean up the environment. And as a mayor and now as a governor, I'm spending my time cleaning our air, cleaning our water, and cleaning the ground. And I think that's where the argument should be on both the left and the right. And if that has an impact on climate change, good. But I think that's where the real argument should be, is doing what we can to clean up our environment. But we also have to look for cost-effective ways to do it, because as a governor, we're walking that fine line of keeping our environment clean, but also continuing the economic recovery and making sure things like power are affordable for the consumer.
So yeah, it's basically the same answer, although I noticed that time when he answered the question, he tried to claim that he was misquoted, that they had like cut off part of the quote, so he was quoted out of context. I thought it was interesting he tried to say that on Face the Nation and not on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and I'm not sure which one came first, so I'd be kind of interested to know, did he like try that first and then say, oh, whatever, and give up on it the second time, or did he remember to say it the second time? But whatever. Anyway, sometimes I enjoy, you know, having watched these Sunday morning news shows for decades, since like the 1980s now. One of the things I like about watching all the shows on Sunday morning is when guests appear on different shows and get asked the same question, you can compare their answers and like try to figure out what were their talking points they had written down to begin with, and how close did they stick to them, or whatever. I guess that's I don't know if that's interesting to a lot of people, but anyway, it's interesting to me. And I also want to show this one more clip from Face the Nation, where, like Meet the Press, where they had Bill Nye the Science Guy, and This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where they had Dr. Helen Cullen, another, I think she's actually a climate scientist, to talk about the facts. They had this guy, I think, former head of the American Meteorological Society. His name is Marshall Sheperd, and he, I'm not going to show his whole interview, but of course, if you check down in the video description, you can, for CBS's Face the Nation, you can find the full interview. And but I liked how he delineated what facts actually are, and how to tell facts from non-facts in the clip you can see here.
You know, the politicians and those that make policy will, you know, decide on how to deal with these issues. As a scientist, you know, we try to report the peer-reviewed literature. I tell my students at the University of Georgia, you know, as scientists, we have to report the science based on what the peer-reviewed literature says, not what Twitter tech says or what the blog state universities say. We've got to go with what the facts are, and we clearly know our climate is changing, and there are aspects of that change that are related to human activities, but we do have to be careful not to try to blame every single event. I think there's a bigger picture context. So we've got to ride it out. I think people have to listen to warnings. In the weather field, our science is pretty good now, but are people consuming the information and making the right decisions? And even as the meteorology community, are we giving them that information in a manner that they can use effectively?
So that was a nice description of what the facts are and what the facts aren't, and peer-reviewed science is better than what you might read on some blog. And I guess what I'm doing here is closer to some blog than peer-reviewed science, but I do try to give links whenever I talk about facts, and I do have a couple extra links I'll be sharing with you later in the show. But I thought it was nice to have scientists on CBS and on ABC and on NBC all talking about climate change. But when the subject of climate change came up on Fox News Sunday, they didn't have any scientists on, but it seems that the people on both the left and the right didn't really talk about the facts of climate change. First, I want to show you what passes for the opinion of someone on the left on Fox News. This is Kirsten Powers, a Fox News contributor. Sometimes she actually does make good arguments from the left, but I didn't think she did this morning. And you can see the topic about climate change and also global warming. They kind of make fun of that, and I'll show you in a minute. I'll show you another clip where they make even more fun of that. But here it's just a sort of a slight chuckle at the beginning in the introduction from Chris Wallace to Kirsten Powers from Fox News Sunday this morning in this clip.
Climate change, I think it's fair to say, used to be a very hot topic, no pun intended. In fact, it used to be called global warming. Now, not so much. Kirsten, what happened?
I don't know, but it has become very much an article of faith on the left that this is perhaps the biggest threat that the world faces right now. And I think that what Obama is doing is a sort of overtly political move here, because there's no way on earth he's going to get $1 billion out of this Congress to do anything, let alone fight climate change. I would say that the fund is focused on reducing carbon emissions, which, whether you believe in climate change or not, I think is something that people should be able to get behind. I mean, less pollution is definitely a good thing. So that might be a better way to make the argument, rather than claiming that climate change is the cause of every single thing that happens with the weather.
So yeah, you can see the person who is speaking from the left on the Fox News Sunday panel there is, the best she'll say is that climate change is an article of faith. Isn't that like the exact opposite of what climate change science is? It's reason, science, not an article of faith. And that part there, excuse me, that part there where they seem to be kind of making fun of global warming, that it's not that warm anymore, and how did that become climate change? That became a lot more explicit in sort of a set-up question to a really biased answer that Chris Wallace gave to this woman from the Wall Street Journal. Her name is Kimberly Strassel, and you can see her like give the worst answer about why we call global warming climate change now in this clip.
So Kim, what's going to happen to the climate change / global warming movement? And maybe you know, because I don't. When did global warming become climate change? When?
It became climate change when you couldn't prove that there was much global warming anymore, as the temperature didn't change. So suddenly we had to have this catch-all term that was responsible. I mean, it meant that any change in the weather somehow supported the theory.
That is like such misinformation. And of course, you can watch all of Fox News Sunday and you'll see no one correcting that, even though I told you to remember that previous clip about the warmest January and the warmest years and being in the last 10 years. And so what Kim Strassel from the Wall Street Journal said there is like totally false. And that's the kind of spin you got on Fox News Sunday this morning on climate change. But there was actually, as I showed you, a lot of good discussion of climate change on NBC's Meet the Press and ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos and CBS's Face the Nation. They all had actual facts and good discussions, and it was only Fox News Sunday where they kind of made a joke out of global warming and climate change. I also want to, as long as I am on the topic of Fox News Sunday here, I want to show their discussion of Obamacare. Of course, Obamacare is a topic just about every week on Fox News Sunday, and they always cover the negative parts. There was actually good news and bad news on Obamacare this last week, because there were some really good enrollment numbers, which they talked about on some of the shows, and I'm not going to show you those clips, but there was also another delay on the employer mandate, and Fox News Sunday used that to tie in with a subject I covered on a previous show about how Republicans are all upset about Obama's executive orders doing things that to change the implementation of the law when Congress won't act, and President Obama spoke about that in his State of the Union address, and I showed a couple clips including Marco Rubio saying that President Obama is increasingly lawless. And anyway, so they picked up on that over on Fox News Sunday to talk about Obama's executive orders, and the thing that I found most interesting or most remarkable about this clip is they actually quoted the text of the law for once on Fox News Sunday when it comes to Obamacare. All those programs I showed where they were talking about Obama lied when he said if you like your plan you can keep it. They never showed the text of the law with the grandfather clause that actually says basically if you like your existing plan you can keep it. But when it comes to Obama's not following the law on delaying the employer mandate, Fox News Sunday finally showed a textual quote from the Affordable Care Act, and I'll show you that. This is they were talking to Congressman Xavier Becerra, a California Democrat, and sort of challenging him with the text of the law and whether Obama is not following the text of the law over in this clip.
Becerra, I got to say, I went back and I read not the whole 2,000 pages, but I read the key parts of the health care law, and it seems to be very specific when it comes to the employer mandate. Let's put it up on the screen. Effective date, the amendments made by this section, this is in the employer mandate, the amendments made by this section shall apply to months beginning after December 31st, 2013. But, Congressman, as you well know, unilaterally, without coming back to Congress, the President has delayed the employer mandate from 2013 to 14 to 15 and now to 16. What gives him the authority to rewrite what seems to be a very clear law?
Chris, it's the same authority that every president has had to make sure that the laws are administered and executed in a way that helps all Americans. The president is simply providing small businesses with the flexibility they need to be able to start adopting the law. Small businesses support the flexibility, and the president is making sure that we implement this in a way that puts into effect the purpose of the law, which is to give people more health security. So if this were against the Constitution, someone would have sued by now, and the president would have had to stop. The reality is the president has used his executive powers less often than almost every president before him.
So they did let Congressman Becerra there get in some important facts about President Obama's actions, you know, that he's used fewer executive orders than previous presidents, and that he's, you know, not really violating the law. But, you know, they showed the text of the law there about how it should go into effect in the months after December of 2013. Of course, it doesn't say how far after, though, and that's a little bit weaselly, but what is not weaselly at all is if you look at the specific section on employer mandates, and here I put a link to it down in the video description, but here I've taken a screenshot of it from 26 U.S. Code section 6056. It says every applicable large employer, and there's another section for other employers, it's a 6055 that you can look at yourself. Every applicable large employer required to meet the requirements of section of 4980H with respect to full-time employees during a calendar year shall, and here I've highlighted this, at such time as the Secretary may prescribe, make a return described in subsection B. So if you're not really following, what that means is even though the previous section that Fox News quoted there says that the amendments go into effect after December 2013, it also says that the Secretary has discretion to prescribe when these have to be put into your returns. So I don't know why Fox News didn't quote that section. I guess he said he didn't really read the whole law, so but it's always very selective, the sections of the law that they quote on Fox News. But I also want to show one more clip on the whole Obamacare debate. They had Representative Mike Lee on, and Chris Wallace actually asked him what Congressman Becerra was talking about there, about how President Obama has actually had fewer executive orders than previous presidents. And so I have to give Chris Wallace credit for that at least. But you'll see by the end of the answer he gets from Senator Mike Lee, one of the leading Tea Party senators, by the way, you'll see he actually misquotes the law that he quoted to Congressman Becerra earlier, where instead of saying that the amendments go into effect after December 2013, it says on. He actually uses the word on instead of after. And I'll show you that clip here.
If you look at the first 5 years of the recent two-term presidents, and we have a graph on the screen, Obama, in fact, has used executive orders much less often than his predecessors going back to Reagan. And this is the question that Congressman Becerra raised, and I think it's a legitimate question for you, sir. If, as a member of Congress, you feel the president is doing something unconstitutional, you said that, violating the Constitution, why don't you take him to court?
Okay, first of all, as to taking him to court, there are many instances in which a president might violate the Constitution, but in which, for a variety of practical reasons and some constitutional reasons, the courts might not end up exercising jurisdiction over that case. It's very difficult, for example, for someone to challenge in court the president's suspension of the employer mandate. it's difficult to identify the kind of plaintiff that would suffer the kind of injury in fact that's particularized to the plaintiff so as to be able to establish Article III standing in court.
Can I ask you about,
as to the broader question?
May I just ask you about that, because I know that that's the answer that you guys give. Well, it's hard to establish standing. And I'm not a lawyer, but it would seem to me, couldn't you say as a member of the Senate, hey, we passed this law. It said that the law will go into effect on December 31st, 2013, and the president has ignored our law, so as a member of the Senate, I have standing to protest that.
Yeah, there are some who have suggested that. There are others who have suggested that under the relevant Supreme Court precedent, it might be difficult for members of Congress even to establish standing in those circumstances.
Well, I actually am a lawyer, and the reason it would be difficult to establish standing in those kinds of circumstances is because the Supreme Court cases I've read say that it's a political question, and so it's not something where the courts are going to intervene in a fight between Congress and the president, and if Congress really believes the president is violated the Constitution, their constitutional remedy is impeachment and removal. That's what the court cases say. So, but what I actually really liked about that clip was how, you notice how Chris Wallace said that the law takes effect on December 31st, 2013, not after, which is what the law actually says. And the word after at least implies that there's more discretion as to exactly when it's going to start. And then I showed you that other section. All right, you can look at it again here. This other section of the law I showed you where it actually gives the secretary the discretion, the secretary, which is of course is a member of the Obama administration, who gets the discretion to prescribe when it is that employers have to put this stuff on their returns. So anyway, those are the couple clips on Obamacare I want to show you from Fox News Sunday. I also want to show you a few quick clips on the debt ceiling fight that didn't really happen this last week. They actually reached a deal on the debt ceiling. And basically what happened is after all the shutdowns several months ago that I covered pretty extensively on LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup, those were some of my most popular shows, I think, because people were trying to tune in to figure out what was happening. Why was the government shutting down? And it made the Republicans look really bad. So this time around, even though the debt ceiling had to be raised, which means that the United States had to borrow more money to pay the bills for money that Congress had already authorized spending for. That's what's so weird about the whole debt ceiling fight, is it's not actually new spending, it's just borrowing authority to pay for what Congress already authorized the president to spend. Anyway, you can see what happened is on the House side, John Boehner, to stop this fight from happening, he just decided to put the thing on the floor and let mostly Democrats with like 20 Republicans pass it, which is what he wouldn't do last fall. He said he needed a majority of his majority before he would put something on the floor. So he gave up on that, and then they didn't do that in the Senate. But anyway, first I'm going to show you a quick clip. I think it was from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where they had their reporter Rick Klein talk a little bit about this and then actually quote Ted Cruz, who kind of screwed the Republican leadership, as I'll discuss a little more after I show you the clip here.
Speaker John Boehner letting Democrats provide the vast majority of votes to raise the debt ceiling, with no strings attached. The same formula would have worked in the Senate until Senator Ted Cruz spoke up.
I intend to insist that it be a 60-vote threshold instead. I think it's an irresponsible course of conduct to keep giving President Obama a blank check.
That set up an extraordinary scene, a roll call held open almost an hour. Cruz forcing his fellow Republicans to cast politically tough votes on the debt ceiling increase. The vote will resonate throughout 2014, starting with Republican primaries, where Tea Party groups view it as surrender. And 2016.
Yeah, so they showed a picture of Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell there, who's in a primary fight with the Tea Party, and that's kind of who Senator Ted Cruz screwed there, because they'd worked out a deal where it would only take 51 votes to pass the debt ceiling, and Ted Cruz threatened to filibuster, and so required 60 votes. So that means several Republicans, including Mitch McConnell himself, had to vote for the end of debate, even though they then went ahead and voted against raising the debt ceiling, which means, they voted for it before they voted against it, and that never plays well with the voters, as Senator John Kerry found out when he didn't become President John Kerry. And I want to show former Senator Jim DeMint, who's now the head of the Heritage Foundation, who's one of the big funders of the Tea Party movement. He kind of spun what happened and tried to claim it. He tried to spin it all as negatively on the Democrats, and actually didn't really take it out on Speaker of the House John Boehner. And he also used this blank check thing that you also heard Senator Ted Cruz say, that this is giving a blank check to President Obama. But as I explained when I introduced this topic, what they're doing is they're authorizing borrowing to pay for spending that was already authorized by Congress. So that's like the opposite of a blank check. It's like borrowing to pay bills already incurred is not a blank check. Anyway, and who was it? Well, I'll talk about it a little more after I show former senator and now head of the Heritage Foundation, Jim DeMint, trying to spin the whole thing over on, I think this was on CBS Face the Nation in this clip.
A lot of us are wondering, how long can this go on? It was a defining vote this week. I think it showed that all the Democrats in the Congress were completely willing to give the president a blank check to borrow whatever he wanted. Most of the Republicans weren't. But the Republican leadership, Bob, has figured out either they give the president all the money and debt he wants, or he's going to close the government down and blame it on them. So I think they did what they thought was the only thing they could do. And frankly, the way it's been reported about the vote in the Senate, actually the normal rule is it takes 60 votes to move to a final vote, what they call cloture. And I think several members, including Ted Cruz, were simply asking, let's keep the normal rules here, and that didn't suit some folks.
Well,
I'm not sure that no filibuster, like requiring 60 votes to avoid a filibuster, is really the normal rule. It didn't used to be that the filibuster was that normal, but these days I guess it is kind of the normal order of business that people have to vote to avoid a filibuster, to end debate and do it in a on the record vote, which is what they required there of Senator Ted Cruz required of other Republicans, including Mitch McConnell. And I don't like to show a lot of pundit clips, though I did show Kristen Powers and Kim Strassel over on Fox News Sunday, but that was just to show the whole biased presentation there. But I really like this one comment from ABC White House correspondent, I think is his title, Jonathan Karl. I don't know, he's one of their reporters. I think he's White House correspondent, and he talked about how this whole incident where Ted Cruz has made other Republicans look bad in the Senate, making them vote to end debate on the debt ceiling, how it's affected his popularity in the Senate over in this clip.
Ted Cruz does this thing. I mean, look, the Republicans in the Senate had this all set. This was going to be able to pass with only Democratic votes. He stands up, says, I'm going to filibuster. Suddenly they need 60 votes. I'll tell you, Ted Cruz is so hated among his Republicans now, more so than even during the shutdown, that at that Tuesday lunch they have every Tuesday, he's going to need a food taster. I mean, he gave tough votes for these guys to take.
He does have a high...
I don't know. He's going to need a food taster. I think that may be a little extreme. I mean, I have started watching season 2 of House of Cards, but even so, I think requiring Senator Ted Cruz to have a food taster, that is a little extreme for reality, maybe. But I don't know. I guess it was a good line, a good soundbite from ABC's Jonathan Karl, and a good way to end the whole debt ceiling thing, which didn't get a lot of coverage because, of course, there wasn't a lot of conflict, and you know how much the corporate media loves to cover conflict and doesn't really know how to cover things where there isn't conflict. So I guess we did kind of cover the conflict a little bit there between Ted Cruz and Mitch McConnell and some of the more establishment leadership. Speaking of conflicts, I did want to do a couple quick clips on the conflict in Syria, which did not get a lot of coverage on most of the shows, but there were a couple clips from Senator John McCain on CNN's State of the Union. He's been one of the biggest critics of Obama's Syria policy, and I mean, he's been a proponent of militarization, and I don't think that Obama's Syria policy has always been that great, but increased militarization probably isn't the answer. But I want to give John McCain first show a couple quick clips of him explaining how he thinks we still have alternative options, and they generally include increased militarization on the part of the United States in the conflict in Syria. And first I'll show you, here's the first clip of that from his interview with Candy Crowley on CNN State of the Union this morning here.
Acknowledge that a failure. They're still, the president was still touting at the State of the Union message the removal of chemical weapons. Then if you acknowledge failure, then you examine and re-examine options which were rejected, increasing arming to the Free Syrian Army, perhaps establishment of a free zone, better arming and equipping. There's a number of tell the Bashar Assad that to stop and take measures if necessary, these horrible barrel bombs that they're dropping on people, which is just indiscriminate killing. We have options. The question is whether we will use them or not. After 8,000 people were ethnically cleansed at Srebrenica, Bill Clinton acted. None of us want boots on the ground, but to not revisit other options which are viable, then I think is the only thing that we can do. This is shameful. This is shameful what's going on.
Now, I mean, I do think just what is going on in Syria is shameful. I mean, there's lots of people dying, and the conflict is caused a lot of refugees, so it is causing a lot of regional problems, and I'll show in a minute John McCain talking about that. But I just don't really buy those options that John McCain is talking about. It's really hard to see how increased militarization or that arming people in the conflict that's ultimately going to have to be resolved diplomatically. I don't know. Well, I'll discuss a little more. I want to show one more clip from John McCain talking to Candy Crowley on CNN State of the Union, basically reiterating what these options are in this clip.
Were 3 years ago. There are viable options. There is a viable Free Syrian Army. There are people who have, there's groups that have joined together against these extremists, ISIS, radical Al-Qaeda extremists that are there. There is still viable opposition that we can help and assist. We can do that. And to do nothing, of course, we'll see a further deterioration and a regionalization of the conflict. Look at the situation in Jordan. Look at it in Lebanon. Look at and recognize that it is Russians and Syrians and outside help and Iraq and Iranians. Look, Iranian Revolutionary Guard are there. 5,000 Hezbollah out of Lebanon have come in and reversed the tide. Remember when the President of the United States said it's not a matter of whether Bashar Assad will leave, it's a matter of when?
Right, and that...
So yeah, there's John McCain again talking about increased militarization as the solution to the problem in Syria, and I do agree that more attention needs to be paid to finding a solution to what's become a really big humanitarian crisis, but I just don't agree with those military solutions. And I want to show a quick clip. This is another pundit clip, but I'm a kind of a fan, not always in agreement, but always a fan of Katrina Vanden Heuvel from The Nation magazine, and she was on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning, directly criticizing the approach of John McCain on Syria, and I want to show you that clip here.
Peggy's right. What you want to change on the ground is double down on the assistance to refugees, to humanitarian assistance. This is a civil war. This is going to play out in the end at a bargaining diplomatic table. And by the way,
in the 3 weeks we've been at that table, the work between Russia has gone at its quickest pace of the entire conflict. The last 3 weeks have been about as bad as it's been.
But to militarize an already militarized situation, the options, as you said, are so limited. But people like John McCain are just shockingly delusional if they think that you're going to pump more weapons in there and not hurt more civilians. That is not a reasonable outcome.
I want to get to one more thing.
Shockingly delusional. I had forgotten that was the exact quote from Katrina Vanden Heuvel on Senator John McCain's approach. Shockingly delusional. So yeah, that was definitely worth playing, even though it is not necessarily a newsmaker. It's more of a commentator, and I am commentating on a commentator, but I do like to, even though I pretty much said the same things that she said there, I forgot to say shockingly delusional, so it was worth playing the clip just for that. I have a few more quick clips I want to show you before I get to the comments and take some comments and try to get a little live discussion going on topics. So if, I've been sort of peeking at the comments along the way, and I've seen several good ones. Hopefully I'll be able to dig them up live when the time comes to get to them. But I want to show you a few clips of Bill Maher, not from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, but from an interview he did on CNN with CNN's Jake Tapper. He has a show called The Lead with Jake Tapper, and he spent a couple segments talking to Bill Maher about various political topics. The first one I want to show is when he was talking about the whole marijuana issue. You know, Bill Maher is, of course, a big proponent of marijuana legalization and admits on his show to being a smoker of marijuana. And of course, Bill Maher also gave like $1 million to a pro-Obama PAC in the last election. And so Jake Tapper interviewed Obama and got him to talk about how marijuana is, his comments about marijuana being less dangerous than alcohol. And anyway, so he played that clip, and I'm not going to show that the clip of President Obama's interview with Jake Tapper, and then asked Bill Maher to comment on how he thinks President Obama will approach marijuana in the second term of his presidency. And I'll show you his answer over here.
Well, I mean, he's evolving very slowly. I'm hoping Joe Biden makes another gaffe like he did with gay marriage and forces the president to evolve a little more quickly. I forgave him a lot more in the first term. I understood why the first black president couldn't be the one to get into office and go, hey, let's spark up, everybody. It'll make all the other decisions easier. But it is the second term. I don't know what he's got to lose. And let's be honest. He was in something called the Choom Gang when he was in Hawaii. If anybody knows that marijuana doesn't prevent you from rising to the top, it would be him.
The Choom Gang. I haven't heard that mentioned, and I actually, for my viewers who don't know what the Choom Gang is, it's this high school group that President Obama belonged to when he was in high school in Hawaii, and they found the right wing dug up a photo of him in the Choom Gang and claimed it was like a big pro-marijuana group, and I think there was some like pro-marijuana aspect to the group, and I dug up, this is from The Blaze, published this photo a while back. Here's the President Obama in the Choom Gang back in high school in Hawaii. You can see him sort of in the lower right-hand corner there with giving the peace sign, and that's a cake that says class of, what is it, 79? Choom Gang, but those are palm trees, not marijuana leaves. I don't think there's like anything overtly marijuana, anything overtly referring to marijuana in that photo. But anyway, that's the Choom Gang. But I like that quote from Bill Maher. And, you know, on the subject of Bill Maher and his political aspirations, I mentioned how he gave $1 million to the pro-Obama PAC. And on his show, he's also doing this Flip a District campaign where he's asking his viewers to find, you know how, he talked about how members of Congress have like a 10% approval rating, but like a 90% incumbency return rate in elections, and it just doesn't make sense. And one of the reasons is because of I think he said there are like 20 who are unopposed, and so he wants to flip a district, and he's asked his viewers to find like the worst members of Congress who aren't being opposed in any way, and he's going to put like the disinfectant of exposure into their races and try to flip districts. And but before that, when he started that campaign, he got a response from a Republican representative, Steve King, who said that Bill Maher himself should run. And so Jake Tapper asked him about this and asked Bill Maher if he would run, and I kind of enjoyed his answer that you can see over in this clip.
Of course not. You know, I'm an atheist pot smoker. It's never going to happen, nor is it something I ever want to do. And And I detect in some of these responses from Republican congressmen that they're a little afraid of the disinfectant that is sunlight. And you should be afraid. Be very afraid.
Be very afraid. I like that part. I think that's a reasonable answer. And it's kind of funny the way they posted up the chyron there from CNN below Bill Maher talking, since that was a recorded interview and they could like put in graphics afterwards when it was broadcast. What did they have up here? Like Bill Maher, atheist pot smoker, or whatever it was. They put up on the chyron there. That was certainly amusing. And I want to show one more clip from that Jake Tapper interview before I get to the comments and then finish up the show. This is Jake Tapper asking Bill Maher, has he moved more towards the Democratic Party from being a libertarian, or has the Democratic and the Republican parties moved that has put him more in line with the Democrats? And I like kind of what Bill Maher's answer is, and also he talks about whether or not he's a libertarian, which is sort of a matter of controversy on YouTube, at least in the comment sections of my YouTube videos. So this is the last clip I want to show you from the show here.
I remember a time when you were more of a libertarian and you didn't like either party. Do you think that you have changed in your politics, or do you think the parties have changed?
Absolutely the parties. I haven't changed at all. I mean, libertarian, I don't know how that stuck around my neck like a millstone. All I ever said was that I think, you know, people should be able to do whatever they do to themselves. If it doesn't hurt anybody else, it shouldn't be a law. I think this is basic libertarianism. Libertarians are the one who became these Ayn Rand nutcases who think we shouldn't have traffic lights, or, you know, FEMA shouldn't exist. People should fend for themselves in a hurricane, or I don't know what they think anymore. But absolutely, I mean, this is well documented that it's the Republican Party that moved to the right. I mean, you can tell this by the fact that Democratic policies like Obamacare are old Republican policies. Cap and trade is an old Republican policy. The Republican Party of 20 years ago became the Democratic Party today, and our biggest problem in politics, I think, is that we really don't have a left party.
Well, I mean, I guess that is true, especially for my viewers out in Europe, or even my Canadian viewers. I think the left in the United States is pretty far to the right compared to the left in a lot of other countries. And I mean, I think both our parties tend more towards centrism. I've talked about this before, about our two-party system and the way our constitutional democracy's worked out. That the two-party system has really made both parties try to move towards the center in general elections, and it's stopped the United States, I think, from having some of the extremes of like communism and fascism that were more able to grab hold in Europe, and especially in like parliamentary democracies where you can win seats in parliament without ever getting like a majority in a national election. And I mean, there are definitely negatives to not having third parties and fourth parties and less mainstream ideas be able to get political traction in the United States. But anyway, so that's kind of a benefit, though. And but I think what Bill Maher said there about how both parties have moved kind of to the right, that is sort of one of the downsides of having no real third-party alternatives, is that when the center starts moving to the right, or one party has sort of moved it to the right, which is kind of what happened, I think, is that the Republicans moved so far to the right that the center kind of moved in that direction as well. That, you know, there's not really any good left or more left party to move our politics back in that direction. So anyway, that was the last clip I want to show you, and now I want to see if I can get some good on-topic comments from the comment section here. I scrolled back to like the beginning of the show here to see if I can remember what. Oh, there's a lot of people talking about weather at the beginning. Well, the people are talking about House of Cards a lot before I started, it seems. So, oh, Bill owned her so hard. Yeah, Bill Nye did kind of own, or pwn, or however you want to pronounce it, Marsha Blackburn. She did not do very well in that debate. Like I said, I think she did even less well than creationist Ken Ham, and of course, I didn't think she got a lot of support. One of the things I didn't show was a clip on NBC where they had, what's his name, the weatherman from the Today Show, where he actually said it's like still a matter of controversy whether humans are causing climate change, and I don't think that's really so controversial. But yeah, at least in terms of when they had Bill Nye versus Marsha Blackburn, I guess in a way that is kind of biased when you have a two-sided debate on climate change when it's not really that much of a two-sided issue in terms of, you know, the scientific consensus. But anyway, let's see, what other comments can I find here in the comment section before I wrap up the show for the night? Let's see. Let's all stop breathing. I don't know what that means. Oh, I see people are arguing with each other. It makes it very difficult for me when you start doing that. Wordy A says, I don't mind climate change as long as it's always snowy here in California. Go snow. Well, actually, although we've had a little bit of a storm recently, we're in the midst of a terrible drought here in California, which is probably, although not definitively provable, related to global warming. I'm sorry, I have to do a quick Marco Rubio here and see if I can pick out a couple more quick let's see. I see comments from the same few people, which I don't mind, but I had about 100 viewers here. Let's see. I think I'm going to have to wrap up the show. Oh, a liberal viewer for president. Well, I don't know if I can have the same response as Bill Maher on why I shouldn't be a politician, but I think what I've said is that when I had a liberal viewer for president comment before is I don't think I would be a good politician, because when I hear questions I tend to try to think of what the actual factual answer is rather than the spin as my first response. Although, I don't know, maybe I could fight that. I did used to be a criminal defense attorney, so it's not that like I am unable to engage in spin to pursue a certain point of view on the evidence. But let me see if I can take one or two more quick comments here. I see I'm well over an hour, so I'd like to finish up. Oh, Andrew Blumenfeld says, I noticed a lot of microphone problems on This Week This Morning. Yeah, I think there was a lot of fumbling that seemed to get picked up by the microphone. I also noticed it on Face the Nation. They seem to have the most audio problems on Face the Nation, where at one point they were like still having the audio feed from their panel when like Bob Schieffer was talking about the next topic without the panel. So let's see. Oh, Gabor Cosper says, let's commentate on LV commentating on commentators. Yeah, let's get like totally meta, and it'll be like so totally a tangent on the tangent on the... Oh, I see JRM 102 is quoting, quote, I'm an atheist pot smoker, unquote, Bill Maher. Yeah, that is a good quote. So anyway, I appreciate let's see, Dialectical Materialium says, can you speak about ACLU's position on laws prohibiting citizens from videotaping police? I actually made a video about that in the past, and I will try to put a link. I can't remember the name of it. It's something like Fox News forgets First Amendment in recording police story, something very close to that. If you like go onto my channel, LiberalViewer, or youtube.com/LiberalViewer, and search through my uploads about recording police, you will see I've already made a video on that topic, and if you're watching this as a recorded show, I'll try to put a link to that video right here that you'll be able to click on right where I'm speaking. But I'm going to end the show now. I appreciate I had more than 100 viewers, at least at one point. How many viewers do I have now? Yeah, it looks like I still have over 100 viewers, so I appreciate all of you joining me live, and for those who watch it during the week. And For my viewers in the United States and in Canada, enjoy the rest of your weekend. And for my, and your 3-day weekend, if you're in the United States celebrating President's Day on Monday. And for my viewers in Europe and around the world, enjoy the beginning of your Monday. I hope I made your beginning of your week a little bit more informed. Hope you enjoyed the clips I chose for you, the commentary that I gave to you to make it all fair use. I'm glad to say I got through the whole show without getting any sort of threatening message from YouTube about using unauthorized content. So hopefully this will all get monetized and uploaded as a recorded show for you all, and I'll see you this week around the internet.